So thank you everyone for coming. To give a little bit of context, so the Featured Artist Exhibition has been part of the Not So Silent Night fundraiser for most of the 20 years that it's been run. And this is my second Not So Silent Night, and so I can't speak to the whole 20-year history of what it's been like, but kind of the process of deciding on the artist. We do a call for artists in early summer, and then we do a jurying process. And this year we had amazing submissions, including our 3 artists here, and we landed on the 6 artists in the current show. And some of the idea is when we're looking at the art, what will be in dialogue with each other? And when we decided on what nights to do the artist talk, we kind of just based it on people's schedules, but I think it's pretty serendipitous that the 3 of you ended up being on the same night, because I think your 3 work is particularly in dialogue with each other in the space. There's similarities in your process and your work, and so I'm excited to be talking with the 3 of you together tonight so that we can kind of explore that. So before we start, I want to give a little introduction to each artist by reading their bios. So I'll start with Shawn. So Shawn, who is based out of Grand Rapids, so we're appreciative for him driving in tonight. He's a contemporary landscape painter whose work sits within the American tonalist and arts and crafts traditions. Shawn received his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Calvin College, studying under you want to tell me how to say it right, Shawn? Christoffel Overvoord. And then after graduating, he traveled frequently to the UK and painted nearly every corner of Great Britain. But most recently, his work highlights the mountains of western North Carolina, the Lake Huron shoreline, and the woods. And he says any woods. Throughout his career, Shawn has shown his landscape paintings with a variety of galleries throughout the country. And in 2016, Shawn was juried into the Roy Crofters At-Large Artisan Guild, based in East Aurora, New York. He was later named a Master Artisan, and in 2019, Shawn was invited to be a signature member of the American Tonalist Society and participated in their inaugural exhibition at the Salmagundi Club in New York. Shawn's continued focus in his studio and his plein air work has been to identify the poetry within a given landscape while seeking to discover a sense of his own place within it. So Rhonda, who is a very familiar face here at Reach, and who is a teaching artist with us frequently, she has been an artist and an art teacher for over 35 years, and she recently retired from public school and is now a full-time artist and teaches workshops throughout Michigan. She was a featured artist at the Shiawassee Art Center in Owasso, and this is, I believe, your second time being a featured artist here at Reach. She continued exhibiting around the country with the International Society of Experimental Artists since 2015 and was chosen for the Instructors Art Show at the Ann Arbor Art Center in August 2019. And her artwork is also illustrating the cover of a book of poems published by Main Street Rag and written by Jan Schumacher. And then lastly, Sam Sikkenga, who we first met through the Mid-Michigan Artists Guild show, and we're thrilled to see that she entered her work to be considered. And she is a Lansing-based artist with a lifelong passion for the arts. Born and raised in Muskegon, Michigan, her family fostered her creativity from an early age. Sam honed her skills in painting and photography while pursuing her education at Northern Michigan University and Grand Valley State University. After exploring other career paths, including becoming a licensed veterinary technician in 2011, Sam was drawn back to art through medical illustration projects. Science, the natural world, and animals are common themes in her work, utilizing water-based media, acrylics, and photography. Sam is, as I shared, an active member of the Mid-Michigan Artists Guild and the Lansing Arts Council. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. And I should say I gave our artists the questions, but as I shared with them, if we'd like it to be kind of an organic conversation, so if other topics arrive, if people have questions, feel free to interrupt, and we'll provide some time for Q&A later. But if an artist says something and you want to learn more, we're pretty friendly group, just shout it out and ask it. So I'm going to ask all three of you to share a little bit about your technique and maybe kind of walk us through your process, kind of from start, maybe even from like inception to completion. So Sam, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So my pieces here, a lot of them, have to do with the feeling I get in an area. It's not some grandiose place I went to see. 3 of the field pictures are on one street on my way to work. So I'm driving by and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. This feeling of, it's either at the end of my day or at the beginning of the day when I need to release some stress, and I, think, oh, that would make a really beautiful painting. Then I just can't get that image out of my mind until I, get it out. So my technique I have here is on gouache on wood panel. I prep it with gesso and modeling paste to make a watercolor ground. I was buying kind of pricey Daniel Smith watercolor ground until I learned how to do the same thing with gesso and modeling paste. Also had pigment with high flow fluid acrylics. It's dense pigment, not too much binder, so it doesn't affect the watercolor gouache going onto it. And then gouache is water-based and it re-wets, so it doesn't take a lot of pigment from the gouache, so you can see the ground through it. But if it gets wet, just like watercolor, it's beautiful. So I coat it with a varnish. So it's UV protectant archival varnish. Golden has a version. I found the Krylon version is beautiful and doesn't smell as bad. So yeah, it's very durable, which I love. I have a toddler and 3 crazy pets, and so my process comes from what I want to do with what I have in my life. So gouache allows me to work for a little bit, get uninterrupted, come back. I can re-wet it. It blends. I started painting in oils. So oils are what I truly fell in love with when I started painting. But I get the same feeling like a watercolor gouache and how workable it is. So yeah, that's kind of where it's all about. Probably more.
What about you, Rhonda? What's your process like?
Well, your point about us being kind of similar, I really like that phrase because we are very nature inspired. I have to say, for me, it's certainly what I see every day and sort of what captures my attention, but it's a little more of it's not a picture in my head from the get-go, it's that sky or that color. And I usually take a photograph or go and sketch and get kind of a rough guideline on that. And these are on walks, so woods, nature are always big inspiring moments, although I've done a few in the last couple of days that are not nature, but emotional and kind of irritated and full of swear words and all that. But I start out with kind of a layer of reckless abandon. So I throw paint on, very wet. I love water media. I'm a water media person. But turning the page, drawing on it, whatever just grabs my fancy, making a pattern. I started out as a printmaker in college, so layering and it's very fun. And in my kindergarten classroom, we did these really big paintings, and it's one of my most vivid memories of doing these sponge paintings with paint everywhere. And so this idea of just throwing paint down is kind of that first layer that I do. And after I get that out of my system, things appear that are kind of, I think when you're seeing with your eyes, you're recording them with your brain, and they kind of come through in your images, even though you're really not planning it yet. But after that layer dries the next day, I'm usually seeing other ways that my sketches, my photographs kind of work into that. So then I'm putting in woods, or I'm starting to see trees or figures or animals. A lot of times there's herons and birds and deer and that kind of thing that pop out. So it kind of evolves from that point into more of a finish. And you're always, I don't know about you guys, but I suspect you're looking at it, adjusting it, and I have pieces that I hang on my wall and I gotta put some more green there, or fix that. Oh, that's driving me crazy. So it is kind of always getting edited, but that's kind of the process in a nutshell for me.
So Rhonda, when you add animals, particularly birds, that's what I've seen the most in your work. Do you work from an example, or is that all from kind of like your memory?
I often get photographs of silhouettes, but birds are tough. I mean, they kind of fly and disappear. So sometimes I need a reference, but I have to witness it for me. If I'm just, I don't want to copy something because I want a bird here for this. I really do need to have that initial experience of it. So yes, I take a photograph often for that reason. If it's something that's quick, like yesterday, there were silhouettes of birds, and right now in those dark trees, they're great. So getting pictures, and then I'll zoom in and use those for stuff too. It's a great question.
What's your process like, Shawn?
Sort of very some similar things, although I work, it's supposed to be an oil paint, but I start, if I'm working plein air, sometimes I'm just working from imagination, but I've got a lot of years of plein air experience, and so sometimes I joke about being brain air, that you can dial something up if you're thinking of a scene or something. But I start with a monochrome underpainting, often right on the white oil prime ground. If I'm out on a painting trip, as I said, I do this monochrome underpainting just to keep it thin, establish my composition, get a nice value range. I've found you're not going to fix a bad composition with color, and you're, in editing later on, I tend to work very thin, so if I build too much up in the underpainting, I'm having to scrape out thicker paint that might be down. So, and I put a glaze, I call it glaze, but it's an oil medium down, and then work often with one tube on those monochromes. Just it's a paint, say maybe a sepia, Old Holland sepia springs to mind because it's in full body, it's opaque, and as you thin it, you can get a nice value range, all just from one tube. So also painting, when I'm painting on site or I'm painting on a painting trip, may not be the golden hour, the nice time of day. It might be noon because you're there to work, and it's what So I'm finding just getting those compositions down then, and then back in the studio, I then start trying to recreate what the scene impressed upon me in the first place. Again, I'll maybe take one of them, the monochromes, I'll smear it with a pink, and then I'll work all my body paint into that pink, and that'll dry, and then maybe put a yellow over the top of that, and rinse, repeat. But it's many thin layers, and sometimes they get towards the end, they get very saturated looking, and some of if there's a bit of a glow, sometimes that's the light kind of passing through those little suspended glazes in the
So you mentioned plein air, and so I'm already going off the questions. Could you talk a little bit about what is plein air? And we also said that you're part of the Tonalist Society. So you're part of kind of a few different guilds and styles of art. Can you kind of share what are characteristics of those?
Yeah, well, the historic American tonalists were, the scholarship on them now sort of tots them up as the first truly American movement where the artists weren't going back to Europe to study. But they were also kind of running concurrent with the French Impressionists, and both of them were looking at the same Barbizon French school, for their inspiration. These were guys that they were in, the art world was moving from Boston to New York at that point, but these were guys that kind of kept studios in the Lower East Side, but they'd spend their summers up in, Massachusetts or Vermont or the Catskills or somewhere sketching. And so, and they would do these, sketches, and they go back to their, smoky little Lower East Side studios and make these these huge paintings, some of the, which you'll find all over the place, and Met. So I think the small studies, is just sort of, you go out, it's portable, you can slide them into a box, you can carry them, and then you use those sometimes to a little this one, a little that one, to create a large studio painting. But I find the direct study is, when I get too far away from it, get into like February, March, when you haven't been outside for a while to paint, it calls you back. You can tell you're relying too much on things.
Yeah.
Always getting back out to the nature.
Yeah.
See.
So I'd be curious, Rhonda and Sam, do you consider your work kind of in a certain school or at a certain style, like artists that you most associate with your work?
I mean, I feel like I paint impressionistically probably, but I have a abstract kind of radical streak too, so I guess both of those together.
Yeah, I'm very influenced by Impressionists. I studied that a lot. I'm kind of obsessed about it in high school especially. I'm drawn to it because my natural tendency is to get very, very, very detailed. So to pull myself out of that is very difficult. And Impressionists, I'm like, how do you do that? So that's I kind of meet in the middle where, I can do a little bit of both.
So I think it's okay to say that you guys are maybe a little more seasoned in your careers. I think it's really nice that, when you talked about your process, clearly you're technicians and experts and have studied your crafts. So how do you keep it fresh, especially when you're researching materials and techniques and you're kind of perfecting something? How do you continue the work and make it new or find new challenges? Do you ever just make comics just to erase the blackboard?
That's a good question, because it is important to be fresh and connected, and it's you work on being a artist, committed to your art, you realize that if you're not committed to it, it shows, and you can see when it's starting to not be there. So I guess the way I keep it fresh is I don't let myself work on something too long, because as you were saying, you can get into a spot and you really just can't let it go. And I do find if I just move on and put those away and work on something new, never, when you're starting to say to yourself, put it away, and get a fresh frame the next day. And it's amazing how it looks the next day. I always take a photograph of my work in progress, and then you can really see it when you see it on your phone. Phones are really wonderful. They give you a lot of different perspectives of what you're doing, and so you can see that it's improving, or wow, I really need to change that. Flip it upside down.
I remember when you used to have to walk away from the work to get that.
Yes.
Now you can just take it.
I know.
Make it small.
Really nice. Really nice tool.
See, I'm lazy, I just squint, like, I get rather than take the steps back.
What about for you, Shawn?
I think I just, and you relate to this too. I think it's the thrill of trying to get it, and when you get it, you sort of celebrate that a little bit, and then but you don't want to be satisfied with that because you want to keep going. I think COVID sort of changed my focus a little bit, and because there wasn't any need to feed galleries, there wasn't demand on everybody had what they needed and they weren't open anyway, so it was, so it kind of changed my focus. And again, that was where I started being a little more long form on those underpaintings, and it gave me the chance to be kind of really dive into, try to be a little more realistic. I started out a little more impressionistic, but then also because of the transparent pigments and whatnot, the underpainting does a lot of the lifting throughout the early stages. So anyway, I guess for me, it's just I think it's almost like not satisfied with it, and so like every new panel is a new chance to get it further along, get more out there than what's up here.
What about for you, Sam?
I feel very new at this, so I think it's been 2 years since I could call myself an artist in public, where I'm like, I made this Facebook page that says I'm an artist. Now it's like official. I've done art my whole life, but I've never felt like I could call myself an artist because, I'm not doing it full time, but then something, maturity happened where I'm like, where did other people start? They just did it. Why can't I? But I still get times where I get really, I get sort of burnt out with things, and that's kind of when I'll just take my camera and go outside in the yard and walk around the house and just take pictures and get different angles on things, and that kind of is a easy release for me. Not that photography is easy, but it's more of a casual thing. And then I also get a lot of influence from my son. He's 4.5, and to watch him do art, he doesn't know any of the rules. He's got this fresh mind, and to watch what he comes up with is just amazing. So I get a lot of, I'm very grateful I get to watch him explore art, you know, he doesn't always like to do it. You know, he says, I'm not an artist. You stop that. Yeah, so that's kind of what keeps me going.
It'd be a little bit, I think you have to get older to remember to paint like a child, you know?
I want to add though, I do think it's a schedule. And you commit a place and a time. So I know when I'm teaching classes, I always tell people, you know, make yourself a space so you can keep stuff out, because, you know, that's a really good way to create and not have to pack up every time you do something, and know when your times are. A lot of people like to work in the morning, a lot of people at night. You know, when is your awake good time, and commit to it and go down and just try. Sometimes you don't always feel like it at the beginning, or you don't realize what you needed to do, so it's just going and doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah, paint because it's time. Paint because it's time to paint.
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
you know, and yeah, if it's not coming, there's always something that needs to be varnished or go in a frame or you know, something on the website to update. You know, as long as you're doing, you know, I don't know, I feel like you justify the business card, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, as a teacher, I had to stop and start a lot, and so I really appreciate being able to just keep the flow going, because when you stop, the flow has to come back, you know, and it's a stop and start is hard. It's hard on your, you know, creative brain. I think if you're always doing that, like kids, they're always doing that, so it's how they think.
So you've touched on a little bit, like the names of like underpaint, or the process of coming to have, what is it, plaster? You said it was, what, so you use plaster or putty?
Oh, it's modeling paste.
Modeling paste?
Yeah.
So I think that when I hear painters talk, I'm always amazed at how much science and craft and technique and specificity goes into the creative process. And I think people assume it's just standing in front of a canvas and making, you know, art, but there's a lot of training and you know, knowing what color does what, knowing the dry down time. Is that a necessary evil for you guys, or is that part of what you enjoy about being an artist?
I like the puzzle, the problem solving aspect a lot. I want to do something, and I hardly ever like see this thing where I'm like, I will do that. I'm like, I want to do this specific thing. How do I get there? Then it's trial and error until I figure out what works.
Yeah. I will say my brushes look like hell, so I'm not. So, media-wise, I think I'm pretty messy. But I know a lot of folks, I suspect you two are a lot more neat about it.
No, I use chip brushes and, you know, here.
I get impatient, you know, I just grab anything sometimes, or the end of my brush to scrape, so.
The 99-cent brushes work.
Yes.
I'll spend a lot on paint, but I won't spend a lot on brushes because I'm just not somebody who should have good brushes. They don't treat them well.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I used to bug my students all the time to clean their brushes, because, oh, that was irritating, to clean for them.
Yeah.
I'm not a good example.
I've bought some nice brush cleaner thinking it would change me.
So Shawn, you mentioned that, like, you know, on a day you don't want to paint, you can frame. And one thing I definitely wanted to talk with the three of you about was framing, because particularly with Sam and Shawn, the frame is an extension of the work. And Rhonda, you've clearly made some choices to minimize the frame, and it's such a huge influence and impact on how the viewer receives the work, and I'd love to hear how each of you have kind of come to make decisions about your frames. You want to start, Shawn?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, a lot of it is, for me, is dependent on where the paint is going. Certain gallery, and I didn't include any in this display, but I work a lot in arts and craftsman style spaces, and so that's, you know, of course, on oak, very warm. I think it suits the tone in my paintings. I also, the arts and crafts movement also kind of ran concurrent with the American tonalist movement in 1890s, you know, early 1900s. So I find there's a lot of, they work well together. But the gallery in Denver doesn't want any of the oak frames. They think puts it in one box, and to a degree, they're right, you know. So sometimes you do things that are more universally used. Every painting gets, I'm very fussy about it, so every painting gets, you know, the frame that it needs, and I spend a lot of time thinking about them and what can work. And sometimes things come out, you know, maybe it's been out at the gallery for a bit, and it comes back to you, and you want to put it in you want to change it. So we work a lot with standard sizes, which makes that a little bit more easy. But yeah, I also work small, and one of the pieces of advice I got was, you know, Mrs. Smith, who's always the collector, the generic collector term, but Mrs. Smith wants something that she can have, see on the wall, and if it's small and doesn't have a frame, it tends to get a little lost. So, put something on it that gives it a little bit more presence. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to explain, and I found these pieces are the only small ones I have left, because for me, I found it's cost, and so it's more of a functional thing about keeping it simple and more modern, and you do need it to be a certain size, so I'm working, 12 by 16 is the smallest I'm doing now. I'm larger because it's really, the frame for me is more cumbersome, so I'm thinking a little more modern, I guess, simple.
Yeah, I'm a big do-it-yourself person, so is my fiance. And frames are expensive if you want a nice one. I used to get frames from the thrift store. A lot of times you could find some really nice frames at the thrift store, but now most are really bad quality and maybe priced more than they were on sale at the store they came from. I love woodworking. I like creating anything really, but woodworking is more concrete than painting, and it forces me to be exact, which it's not natural for me, but it's a fun challenge. So my frames are, pieces of wood I picked out and cut down and made to go with the piece. There's one there that is, I love the story that a piece of wood has. There's curly white oak. There's 3 of the frames. That's an oak tree that's gotten so big and old that it's kind of squashed down and the bark starts to curl. And then that affects the wood grain. I like the story that brings from nature. And one is salted red oak. That's wood that has it's rotten. So, and then has those cool black streaks in it. That's a piece of wood that was kind of towards the bark, so it has a lot of the spalting on it. And that I saw the piece of wood and I was like, that's beautiful, I have to have it. And so then it sits in the basement for a little while until I know what to do with it. Yeah, I enjoy picking those pieces to complement the work.
So I made a tactical error and didn't bring my clock with me. Could someone tell me how much time we have?
It's 18 minutes to 2.
Oh, okay. So we have time for a couple more questions before we open it up. So one thing that's, I think, interesting about the three of you is you kind of all have different pathways to becoming exhibiting artists. You know, Shawn went the traditional BFA route. Rhonda, you're an arts educator. And then Sam, you kind of came later and you know, started in a different path. So I'd love to hear kind of how you guys approached it and have kind of been able to enter that space.
I guess it was kind of the thing I wanted to do. So it was the goal of trying to make it happen, and just sort of, you know, standing in front of different doors and seeing which ones will open. And you know, my first, right after, you know, a couple weeks after I graduated, I was studio assisting somebody that one of the professors had recommended, and you know, just working with him, it changed my way of from what I had been doing and whatnot. And so, but he was, you know, I was, you know, young, in my young 20s, and he was probably mid 30s at that point, and you know, just kind of seeing what, you know, what somebody who was doing what I wanted to do and how they were doing it. It was really that was really helpful. And now this was, you know, kind of the late 90s, so, you know, before things like Instagram and where you could find galleries or find different, you know, things a lot more easily. I mean, all the noise that goes along with it too, but I mean, yeah, I guess it was what I wanted, so I didn't want to not do it, so I guess that's.
Yeah, I got my BFA too, but realized that, you know, it probably, at that stage in my life, I needed a career that would also feed me, so I did teaching, and it worked out really good because students were inspiring too, and like your young boy, it's very inspiring to see kids get going in an art room, and so it worked very well in my life to have teaching and then art on the weekends, and I would go to Oxbow and do a session there, Western. I did sessions all the time in the summer, and, you know, exhibited in shows when I could, so kind of just keep that thread going. And there's a lot of folks that want to be creative, and I would say to you, it's possible. You just have to put the time in, and that's very possible, because all you do is enter and get in, you know, and just make it and enter and get in. And so now that I have time to be full-time, it's, you know.
How many submissions do you think you're entering a month?
You know, I feel like I'm a local artist, and I want to do galleries here, and I want to do where I know people, and I've done the ISEA, but I know folks in there, and so I've kind of made friends, and get to travel, so that's nice. But I would say I'm not aggressive. I try to enter 1 or 2 things a month, maybe 1 sometimes.
Do you think it's helped that you've kind of progressed in your career? You don't have to do as many open calls?
Yeah, I think think it has to be from you, and if you're making it to sell it, there's a whole different vibe. I don't know how you two feel, but I've never had to sell it to live. So I don't know what that feeling is like, but I suspect it's different for folks that, you know, what's selling, why is this not selling, should it make more of that? And that plays with your mind and what you should create, I think, personally.
Yeah, so my plan from high school was going into, college for art. So I ended up at Northern, which had a beautiful art program. Went there for 2 years. I had some stuff happen back in Muskegon, so I went home. And then Muskegon had a veterinary technology program at Baker College, so I was like, well, I'm home. So first I was like, well, let me go try Grand Valley. I wasn't really happy with my experience at Grand Valley. It was very, very big compared to Northern. I didn't go for long, but then I went to Baker, graduated veterinary technology, and all through Baker I was, to study, I'm a visual learner, so I was drawing like parasites and things. So, I was doing art the whole time, and then kind of, I had went through some rough times that made me really appreciate life and appreciate the things that I love in life and what makes me feel good. So there was a period of time where I didn't do art, so things I was going through. Then when I was getting back on my feet, I started back into art with a different perspective than I ever had before. Because I wasn't doing it to impress people, I was doing it to almost impress myself, getting my self-worth back, finding some meaning. So that's, when I've tried to do things to sell, like I try to craft things occasionally, and I'm like, oh, I made this thing and it sold really well, okay, I'm done. Can't do it again. So now I'm trying to maintain the idea that I'm doing what makes me happy, and if other people enjoy it, that's awesome. And I'm really, surprised, like when I enter something and it's accepted, I'm still like, what? Is it a mistake? So it's, and with that view, hopefully if I don't make it or something, or maybe I won't be as let down, but I don't know, but that never works. But yeah, so I'm really new to putting myself out there, and I'm really, really surprised at how it's received, and yeah, it's awesome. So that's the both worlds. It makes me feel better creating, and also other people seem to enjoy it. So.
You work with a lot of galleries, Shawn, so I'm kind of curious if that's your experience about like when something, like kind of looking at the trends of what's selling and not.
I mean, I kind of when I'm looking for a gallery, I'm looking at their roster and seeing if they have somebody. If they already have somebody who's taking my approach, then I know I'm going to hear no from them. But if I find a niche or something where I think my work would fit in with what they're doing, I mean, it's almost like grad programs where the new people coming in fit the aesthetic of what's kind of going on. I don't know. When I was young, I could hear no all day, and it didn't bother me too much. Now I'm probably a little more selective about what I apply to. Things that are more sure of working or for me or whatever. But I mean, I guess I also think too, like it's although I used to do a lot of other side hustle for a lot of years, was working with bands, and who are the band, all the bands were kind of, well, what caused you to make it? Well, I didn't quit, and so everybody else that didn't make it quit, and so I just, because I'm stubborn and I just, I just don't want to, I want to just keep going. So, I don't know, but yeah, I think, you can't be afraid to be, told no, because it really doesn't matter that much. It'll hurt for a bit, but,
And there is something to be figured out where you fit. That's
Yeah.
a great point. Because your work doesn't fit everywhere. It shouldn't fit everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like doing shows that are, I'll do a show that's maybe a craftsman style arts and crafts show. I may be one of 2, maybe 3 painters. Everything's furniture, antiques, clay, different things. And so I always found, again, because I work small and I work fairly quiet, I don't tend to do well in the big white box gallery type thing, because the work doesn't grab you from across the room. I mean, it might draw you in, but it doesn't. So yeah, finding those scenes, those scenarios where, it might be an arts and crafts show, people coming in may not be looking for a painting, but if they decide they want one, well, I have them, and so then you have a better shot.
So I want to give a chance before our time is up for people in the audience if you guys have any questions. Well, then I can end in my last question, which is, at Reach, a lot of what we do here is promote creative community, right? That you're making art, but you're making art alongside the person next to you. And I'm curious how community has impacted you in your work, either as through mentors or through guilds or through different, societies like the Tonalist Society. What role does community play in your art practice?
I think I'm still looking. I retired right before COVID, so a lot of it was online, and so now I'm part of the Ann Arbor Guild, the gallery, and I love anything in this area, so I've taught here, folks here. But yes, I have a Sunday group that's virtual, but they're really great. And you studio for 2 hours, everyone's watching, and you're all doing studio, and then you have time to talk at the end. And this is a group of people from all over the state, the country, but that's how I've started to be. So it's very, you're just one person creating, but finding your people, it's tricky. I mean, I have art teacher friends, but they do art real random and different, and, we'll connect. But the people you trust to look at your work, and that's a special relationship that you don't naturally find. So you really do need to go out and look. So I'm kind of actively still doing that myself.
So I am a member of the Mid-Michigan Art Guild here, and they are extremely helpful. I've made some close friends. Honestly, when I started going, I think I was the youngest person in the group by maybe a decade or so, maybe. But I've learned a lot from them, and they were very open to sharing. There's definitely artists have quirky personalities, so myself included. And so I think one of the guild meetings started by, all right, who's ready to get their social interaction quota for the whole month? So it's like, we'll do this meeting, then we'll be done for a month. So, but it's definitely a different feeling creating with others who are like-minded. So whenever I've done a couple workshops with them, and that is so, it's not my best work. That's a very stressful place to be working with other people around. But but it's definitely it brings a sense of community, which is so helpful and so supportive. And there's people that in the guild that I can ask help from and ask advice from and get honest feedback. And I miss the relationship between like professor and student in an art class where there was honest critique from someone you trust. And yeah, it is really hard to find that relationship because you post something online and everyone's like, beautiful, wonderful, great. And you're like, okay, but no. You didn't notice this part over here. Who's going to be my friend that says, you know that part? And I'm like, yes. How do I fix it? So yeah, it's hard to find that. And then when someone does critique online, you're like, oh my gosh, why would they do that? I'm never posting again. So yeah, it needs to be for me something live, like online live, or in person is best. So yeah, the art guild's been very helpful. I don't really have time for any other sort of friends or community at the moment, but I'm excited. I'm taking a class here with my son this weekend, so we're going to have some art community.
I find, I don't know, like working, again, like this Roycroft Guild that I belong to, there aren't that many painters, but I find myself, and we do a lot of collaborative type pieces. The tradition of the guild, it was originally anyway, long story short, but every year the guild produces, a couple people from the guild produce this collaborative piece, which is raffled for the benefit of the guild. So I did a Four Seasons motif inside a arts and crafts cabaret, the small side table, the drink table, and so they were fit in, and I find kind of finding unusual inspiration in somebody's glaze, somebody's manipulation of a photograph, something like that. So anything that I can kind of grab onto and bring back to my painting, I find that kind of interesting because I paint fairly traditionally, and after a while, there's a lot of traditional work out there and so I just you try to find something that makes yours a little different, and sometimes that's finding something in somebody else's work that you can latch on to for a bit. So.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, this has been a real pleasure, and thank you for coming out again. And before we give them a round of applause, I do want to point out on everybody's seat is an invitation to our fundraising event, which is December 7th. The QR code will bring you to the event page to register, but it's also a page where if you're interested in purchasing any of the items in the gallery show, you can purchase them online. Half of the proceeds do go to benefit Reach Studio Art Center, so it's part of the fundraiser. And I want to thank them again. Thank you, Shawn and Rhonda and Sam, for joining us.